Hello, guys. How's it? Sorry, I'm just trying to get this thing set up here in a new spot again. I'll get it. Hold on.
Travel that around, eh?
Yeah. Also, I'll try and get this on. Let's see if that works. Oops. Sorry for that. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, now I got the sound set up, and now let's get the screen share.
Hello, Rabbi.
Hi.
Hey, David.
Hello,
Okay,
hello.
I'm gonna go dark for a second because I just need to get the share, and then I'll be with you. Hold on.
Hi, Rabbi. How's everyone?
Hello.
Hang on, I can't.
Well, I've just had a sneezing session. Genossen auf ein Emmes, as they say. 3 times.
Okay, apologies for the delay there. But now I think everything's up. You guys, can you see the screen? Can you hear me all?
Yes, we
If you
can.
just
Can you hear me?
raise,
Yes, but you can see it.
Bring it down, yeah. No,
Yes,
that's
There we
fine.
go.
yes,
Perfect.
Okay,
that's
great. So here we go. The laws, let's just ask them to mute, and there we go. If you need to unmute, you can do so. Meantime, just to limit the distractions. Okay, the laws of Tamidin Musafim, chapter 3. So today we begin with one of the other daily offerings, which is the incense offering, and we'll see how it's done and a few other particulars of the daily service. It's a positive command to offer the incense offering on the golden altar. So the animal sacrifices were brought on the outer altar, the large altar. The golden altar was a small, and it was inside the sanctuary, the inner chamber of the Beit HaMikdash, and this was done twice daily, in the morning and in the afternoon. And here we have a pasuk: "V'hikter of Aaron keteres samim," and Aaron shall burn on it the incense of the fragrant spices. If one did not offer it in the morning, he should offer it in the afternoon, even if the mission was intentional. In other words, the one is not dependent on the other. And then the Rambam says the golden altar may be dedicated only with the incense offering of the afternoon. That means, you'll remember that we learned about the daily sacrifice, that a new altar can only be dedicated by the morning offering. So for whatever reason there was a new altar, you would not bring the first animal offering in the afternoon. It would have to be a morning offering. And when it comes to the incense offering, if there's a new altar that needs to be dedicated by offering on it, that was done only in the afternoon. Okay, halacha base. How much incense was offered each day? An amount that weighed 100 dinarim, and this was divided 200 in the morning 100 dinarim, which is 50 in the morning and 50 in the afternoon. Where did I get to 200? Because if you'll see, I believe the note tells us that it's approximately 4 grams of in a modern measurement. So it would be 2 grams in the morning, 2 grams in the afternoon offering. Now, if the altar was removed from its place, meaning if for whatever reason there wasn't a golden altar there, the incense offering should nevertheless be offered there. That's the place to do it, even without the golden altar. When incense, even a grain of it, flies off the altar, it shall not be returned. It's not put back on an altar, but it needs to be covered over and put aside. Halacha 3, when the incense is offered in the sanctuary every day, all of the people depart from the sanctuary and from the area between the entrance hall and the altar. It's considered a moment of such spiritual intensity that nobody else could be around. No one should be there until the priest who offers the incense offering comes back out. Similarly, at the time when a priest enters to sprinkle blood of a sin offering that is offered inside the temple, everyone departs from the area between the entrance hall and the altar until he comes back out, as the pasuk says. And no one shall be in the tent of meeting when he enters to atone in the holy place. So what we learn from here is a general principle that all those offerings that are done for atonement in the holy place, no one else should be there. So people have to move out of that area. Halacha 4. What is the order of the offering of the incense offering each day? So now we're going to go into the particulars of it. So the priest who merited to remove the ashes from the inner altar enters the sanctuary holding a consecrated vessel called a teni. Now, here we reference this idea of a priest that merits to remove. How is this merit determined? So we'll learn later, and it's I'm pretty sure we've come across it before as well, is that certain of the services in the temple were determined by lottery. So every day a lottery would be done by those who were designated for service on that particular week or that particular day, and one kohen would be designated through this lottery. That is what we call the one who merited. So the one who merited to remove the ashes from the inner altar, he would go in first with a teni. This is the type of bowl. It was gold, as we find with most of the temple vessels. But we say that we want to enhance the service by using only products of the greatest, most valuable material, and it would contain 2.5 kabin. He would place the teni on the ground in front of him and scoop up the ashes and the coals on the altar with his hands. This was obviously the next morning once it's burnt out and cooled down. So he would take out the extra ash and then he would put it into the teni. At the end, he would sweep off the remainder of it, and he would then leave the teni in the sanctuary and depart. The one who merited to bring the incense offering would take a vessel filled to overflowing with incense. The vessel had a cover that was called a bezach. He would place the bezach in another vessel that was called a kaf. These were both kind of large ladles. So the bezach would fit within the kaf. The kaf was a larger ladle. He would cover the kaf with a small cloth and hold the kaf in his hand. Another priest would enter the sanctuary with him, holding a fire pan with fire. So we'll see in a little bit more detail in the upcoming halachot exactly how this worked out. So far what we've referred to 3 different kohanim involved over here. We'll see that in total it's actually 4 kohanim that were involved in this process. So how does he collect the coals with the fire pan? He takes a silver fire pan and ascends to the top of the altar and moves the coals to the side, taking the coals that have been consumed by the fire in the second array, and descends and places them into a golden fire pan. Remember, I don't know if it was in yesterday's chapter or the day before, we learned about the different fires that were on the altar. There were 3, right? There was the big one, and then there was the second one, which was used then as the source for the coals that were taken to go and burn the incense. So now what happened was he would take kind of like one utensil, which was silver, to collect coals, and then it would come off the altar, and there was a special golden fire pan, which he would then fill from the silver one. And the silver one was actually larger by 1 kav than the gold one. So it was likely that when he poured from the larger one, the silver one, into the gold one, that some of it would spill over to the sides. So he says, if a kav or less of the coals have become scattered on the ground, he should just sweep them into the channel for the outflow. Basically like a gutter system on the temple ground. So the excess, if it was just a kav or less, the excess would get pushed out of the temple. On Shabbos, obviously you can't move those coals, but he should cover them with a pesachter, which was a type of bowl he would cover it with. If more than a kav became scattered, he should collect more with the fire pan. In other words, the golden one needs to be full to the brim. Okay, just now that we've mentioned this pesachter, which we actually mentioned yesterday as well, he says that it served 3 functions. It was used to cover the coals, and it did a calling animal on Shabbat, and it was used, this is what we learned about yesterday, to remove the ashes from the altar. Here we're talking about the ashes of the outside altar, the main ashes. So here we go. We go into a little more details exactly what transpired. The priest who removed the ashes from the inner altar would proceed before them. So here's the first one that would go into the area of the Kodesh. He would take the teni, as we've mentioned, that contains the ashes from the altar, prostrate himself and depart. So once he'd filled the teni, puts it down, he would then bow down. That signifies that he'd finished his part of the service. Then the priest that's holding the fire pan, who had taken the fire from the outside altar, would array the coals on the surface of the inner altar, which had just been cleaned, and he would spread them using the bottom of the pan, and then he would prostrate himself, he would leave. Then the one holding the kaf, meaning that had the incense in it, would remove the bezech from the kaf, which was this smaller ladle that he's taking out of the larger ladle, and he would give it to a friend or a relative. He checks if some of the incense spilled out of the bezech into the kaf, making sure that it doesn't get spilled off. His friend or relative places the incense that's spilled and that which is in the bezech in his hands, and then prostrates himself in the pots. So you have the one who carried the incense in, and the one that actually is going to put the incense on the altar. The one who carried it in has now transferred it, and he steps out. And now the one who offers the incense, he's the one that's about to put it onto the altar, onto the flames. So at this point, it says that he is warned, meaning the one who oversees the service. He says, be careful, do not begin releasing the incense in front of you lest you become burnt. Really, he had to do it in such a way that he didn't have to lean over the flame that he would get burnt. And he begins to pour the incense on the fire gently, like one who sifts flour until it spreads over the entire fire. Now, over here, what we see is that he was warned, kind of given instruction exactly how to place the incense on the fire. We'll learn later that this particular service done in the Beis Hamikdash was never given to the same person twice. It was such a unique type of service that it could only be given to only a Kohen could only do it once, and therefore every time it was done, you had to have somebody who was there to give direction, because nobody had experience, as it were, with this. The only one I think that could offer it more regularly would be the high priest, as we'll see in the next halacha. The priest who offers the incense does not offer it until the overseer tells him, offer the incense. If the high priest is the one offering the incense, the overseer says, so this was, it's uncertain exactly who this is. It seems to be that it was the Sagan Kohen Gadol, the assistant to the Kohen Gadol, who was overseeing what was going on and making sure that the people each Kohen did what they had to do. So he would have to wait for that instruction. And if it was the high priest who is offering the incense, then he wouldn't just say offer, but he would refer to the high priest with the correct, respectful titles. He would say, Ishi Kohen Gadol Haker, sir, my sir, the high priest, offer the incense. After he says this, all of the people depart from the area of the front of the temple building. Okay, this is the point that we referenced earlier, that as the Ketores is being brought, everybody has to move away. He then offers the incense, prostrates himself, and departs. Okay, so that's describes what would happen for the incense offering. So you had the person cleaning the golden altar, you had the person collecting coals from the outside altar, you had the person collecting the incense itself, and you had the person who would then put the incense on the altar, the actual golden altar. Another service that took place daily. The removal of the ashes from the lamps of the menorah and their kindling in the morning and the afternoon is a positive commandment. I just note that not all agree with the Rambam that the menorah is lit both in the morning and in the evening, but that is the position of the Rambam. And what would happen is you would have to essentially clean out the lamp, the cups, and then rekindle. And this is a positive mitzvah, as the verse says, Ya'arech Chesar and Avanav, Aaron and his sons shall arrange it. So the kindling of the lamp supersedes the prohibition of forbidden labor on Shabbos and the restrictions of ritual impurity. So again, this was something done on behalf of the community, as we've seen with other offerings that are done daily, constantly, and on behalf of the community. Other restrictions are put aside. So if the majority of the Kohanim and the majority of the community is impure, you would still go ahead with these services. And these services also would supersede what would otherwise be restrictions of Shabbos. You're not allowed to light candles on Shabbos, but the menorah, you could. The restriction of ritual impurity, it says, as other sacrifices are offered at fixed times. As the pasuk says, how do we know that the lighting of the menorah falls into this category? Because we have this verse, to raise up continuously burning lamp. How much oil should we put into each lamp? The lamp here, we're talking about the cups on the top of the menorah. So he says a half a log. And this is implied by the verse, from the morning until the evening. Why the morning to the evening? Because it implies that one must use a measure of oil that will enable it to burn from the afternoon until the morning. The menorah may be dedicated only with the kindling of the 7 lamps in the afternoon. Again, so the first time it's done must be in the afternoon. It's interesting to note that not always is evening till morning the same amount of time, right? Because summer nights are much shorter than winter nights. So how do we come to this conclusion that a half a log is going to be enough to get you through? So there are different opinions here exactly how this was achieved. Either that a half a log was enough for a winter night, and in the summer night there would be some left over, and that's not considered a problem because excess is a sign of wealth. Or, according to some, they would actually change the size of the wicks depending on the length of the night. So a thinner wick would be used in the longer nights, and a thicker wick would be used on the shorter nights, because the thicker wick obviously drawing more oil at once. This, by the way, has interesting connotations to help us understand the Hanukkah miracle, but we'll leave that for now. Halacha 12. What is meant by the expression, the removal of the ashes of the menorah? So what exactly was done, right, in order to prepare it for the lighting? So he says every lamp that has burnt out should have its wick and its remaining oil removed, and it should be clean. The priest should place another wick and other oil in it, using the half log measure. The wick and the oil then removed should be placed in the ash heap near the outer altar, together with the ashes removed from the inner altar and the outer altar. The Gemara actually infers that those ash, some of that ash would get consumed miraculously. He should kindle any lamp that was extinguished. So if he finds that it's full, but the flame went out, he light it anew. Kindling the lamp is what is meant by the term hatava. Now, also here, this phrase hatava, there are differences of understanding. The Rambam understands it means cleaning and lighting the candles. Others understand hatava tanera to be just simply the cleaning out. And they wouldn't necessarily go along with the Rambam's understanding that there was cleaning and lighting both in the morning and the evenings. Anyway, when one discovers a lamp that has not been extinguished, he should restore it. In other words, means just add extra oil. If it's still burning, let it continue to burn, just adding oil so that it will remain burning. When the Western lamp became extinguished, so there are different understandings of what the Western lamp is. Either it's the middle lamp, what we would call the shamash, or it's the one, the first one after the most eastern lamp, the second lamp. He says, so if that became extinguished after the ash is removed, it should be rekindled only from the fire from the outer altar. That's considered the main candle and should only be lit from the outer altar, according to what the Rambam is saying here. When any of the other lamps are extinguished by contrast, they may be rekindled from each other. But certainly, none of them should be kindled from an external flame. Okay, that's what's important here, although there are differences of opinion exactly how this was done. This is the Rambam's view. Now, how would you light one candle from the other? Because remember, they're in a fixed bowl. You can't exactly take the bowl off and light the one next to it. So he says, how would the lamps in the menorah kindled? This is if it's gone out. So one should pull its wick out. The wicks were long. So you could extend the wick and touch it to the flame next to it. Right? And then kind of feed it back. Because the lamps are permanently fixed within the menorah, meaning that's why you can't put the one to the other. You have to extend the wick, let the flame catch, and then it could go back in. And you may not use another lamp because that would be disrespectful. In other words, something other than the flames of the menorah. Halacha 15, all of the substances that are forbidden to be used as wicks on Shabbos. So here what we're talking about is different material that doesn't have a clean or a consistent flame. So you're not allowed to use those on Shabbos. On Shabbos, the concern is that you might play with it, you might end up desecrating Shabbos in that way. For the menorah, the concern is that those same types of material that don't create a nice, clean, and constant flame, you're not fulfilling your mitzvah, as the Torah says, the halot ner tamid shetei shaleva spelem aleh, that you should raise up a continuously burning flame. And our commentaries say that it should be a flame that rises up on its own. It shouldn't have to need constant playing with to try and make sure that it stays burning. So you need a wick that draws the oil and keeps the flame nice, clean, and constant. Halacha 16, the priest would kindle all the lamps at once. Sorry, he would not kindle all the lamps at once. Instead, he would kindle 5 lamps and make an interruption. Okay, he would do the first 5, and then in the interim, another service was performed. Afterwards, he would re-enter and this would be one of the services taking place on the outer altar. Afterwards, he would re-enter and kindle the other 2 in order to attract the attention of everyone in the temple courtyard. It seems like by extending the service, it would create more awareness, and that was the idea. Halacha 17, whenever one of the lamps of the menorah was extinguished, we kindled from another lamp, as we explained, right? Pulling the wick out, extending the wick. what is the order in which they were kindled? Okay, so now we're going again through a little bit more specifics. The Kohen, again, here it was somebody who was chosen by virtue of a lottery, who merited to remove the ashes of the menorah, enters the sanctuary carrying a vessel referred to as a kuz. It was made of gold and resembled a large pitcher. They replaced the wicks that were extinguished and the oil that remained in the lamp in it. Okay, that's what he's cleaning out. He would then kindle 5 lamps with replaced wicks and oil and leave the kuz and the second step of the 3 steps positioned before the menorah. There was the steps that Kohen would stand on when he cleaned out the menorah and lit it. And then he would depart. Afterwards, he would re-enter and kindle 2 lamps, take the kuz in his hand, prostrate himself, and depart. Again, this was the bowing down that each Kohen would do at the conclusion of any particular service, as we saw previously. Halacha 18, there's a positive command to offer the chavitin. The chavitin we learned about are the flat cakes that the high priest would offer each day, half in the morning, together with the continuous offering of the morning, and half in the afternoon, together with the korban tamid, the continuous offering of the afternoon. Now, kneading these cakes and baking them supersede the prohibitions of forbidden labor on Shabbos and the restrictions of ritual impurity, as the other sacrifices that are offered at fixed times. Again, this is the same principle that we learned when it comes to lighting the menorah. From the as the pasuk says that these cakes must be tufine, which allows for the interpretation that they must be na'eh, attractive, meaning, and thus not baked on the preceding day. So, because this had to be something that was fresh, that's how we know that it had to be prepared every day, and therefore it's considered to be a continuous thing and a fixed time, and thus it has the same allowances as the other korbanot services that were similar, those consistent daily fixed offerings. Moreover, were they to have been baked on the preceding day, they would have been disqualified by the passage of the light, for the deep frying pan, or the pan that it was made in, is one of the sacred utensils, as we've explained, and any food that stays within a utensil, a holy utensil, overnight becomes unfit. So what the Rambam is emphasizing is that this was something that had a fixed time, was done daily, and therefore has those allowances. Halacha 19, providing the flour for them and sifting it, which is performed outside the temple courtyard, does not supersede the prohibition of forbidden labor on the Shabbos, meaning that must be done before Shabbos. It's only the kneading of that dough by mixing the flour and the water that can be done on Shabbos. Halacha 20, when a high priest offered half of the cakes in the morning and then he passed away or became impure or contracted a disqualifying physical blemish, and another priest was appointed in his stead, the latter should not bring half an isaron. Isaron was the measurement of flat cake from home in the afternoon, nor should he bring half an isaron remaining from the offering of the first high priest. It's not his offering, it has to come from him. So what should he do? He should bring a complete isaron. In other words, he should prepare a complete isaron, but half of it was then offered together with the daily sacrifice, and the other half was destroyed. Well, we'll see what that means shortly. Thus, 2 half esronim will be offered and 2 will be destroyed. In other words, the second half from the first priest and the second half from the second priest would not be offered, but would be destroyed. The 2 halves that will be destroyed, how do you destroy it? Should be left until their form is no longer recognizable, and then be taken out to the place of burning. The same law applies if the half of a high priest offering that was set aside until the afternoon was lost or became impure. So you set it aside until it's unrecognizable, and then it would get burnt. Where should they be burnt? In the temple courtyard. Halacha 22, I think this brings us to the end of the chapter. Yeah, last halacha for today. If the high priest died in the morning after he offered the half of an isaron, and another high priest was not appointed, so there was no one to officially do it, then the heirs of the first should bring an entire isaron as an atonement for the first. It was also offered complete. And if the high priest died in the morning before offering the chavitin, so he hasn't done anything yet, and another high priest was not appointed in his stead, their heirs should offer a complete isaron in the morning and a complete isaron in the afternoon. The amount of oil and the frankincense offered with it should not be doubled, even though the amount of flour is doubled. In other words, a complete isaron. Instead, 3 logam of oil and a handful of frankincense is set aside for them, which was the normal amount, a log and a half of oil and half a handful of frankincense for the isaron of the morning, and a log and a half of oil and half a handful of frankincense for the isaron of the afternoon. So that's the way they would deal with making sure those offerings were done on behalf of that Kohen who's no longer there to do it. Okay, I'm going to shift to the bottom of the page. Whoops.
Rabbi, do you have time for a question?
Yes, I do. I'm just trying to see where the quiz is. Why is there no quiz here today?
Ah, yeah, there's no quiz. Yeah, you're right. Well,
That's interesting. Let's try. Let me just. Oops, sorry. I'm clicking the wrong thing. Let's go back. Let's see if we can refresh this page.
shall I
Test you
ask
guys.
while
Make sure everyone
you,
was listening. Yeah. In the
Huh?
meantime, go ahead, Steve. Go ahead.
Rabbi?
Question. Yes.
in the morning with our Tfilat HaShacha, when we recite Tfilat HaShacha, the Ribbona Olamim, it says, you have commanded us to offer the daily sacrifice at its appointed time and to have the incense offering at its proper time, with the Kohanim officiating, the Leviim chanting, and the Israelites attending the service. Now, which part of the service do the Israelites attend? They I understand they're not
Well,
allowed the temple courtyard, Israelites.
that was during
What do you mean by
the
attending
incense
the
offering.
service? Sorry?
They were there for the daily sacrifice, for the tamid that we learned
Where
about
were
yesterday.
they though? Where were they?
Well, there were parts of the temple where they were allowed to be and parts they weren't allowed to be. There was a platform even in the temple courtyard where there was a certain place where they were allowed to go.
Were they
until.
allowed to congregate there? Were they allowed to be there?
They were designated spaces.
Designated space. Oh, that's what I wanted to ask.
Yeah. Again,
Okay.
so with this, where we said they had to clear out the area was for the incense offering, but for the tamid offering, they were there, yeah, in the designated space.
For the burnt, yeah, the tamid,
Yeah, which is a burnt offering, correct?
the burnt off. And the
Okay.
and did they come in? I mean, yeah, the whole logistics of it is, I suppose, we'll get to know about.
Yeah, we're gonna have a lot more details.
Yeah.
For the korbanot.
Yeah.
And we've had some, but we're still getting plenty more. It's all coming.
Thanks,
Okay.
Rabbi.
Thanks.
Okay, Shkar, guys. Thanks so much. Have a wonderful
Thank you.
day. Thanks,
Thanks, Rabbi.
Cheers, everybody.
Bye.
Take care.